All right, now we're going to be looking at parts of an APA paper. So what is APA, right? I've said APA, American Psychological Association. What does that have to do with us, right? So the APA publication manual is published by the American Psychological Association. It is the best way to communicate scientific theory and findings. It actually applies across research styles, so qualitative, quantitative, multiple studies, single studies, and so forth, and so on, all of those listed on the screen. So this is what we use in specifically psychology, but in other social sciences as well sometimes. So how do you recognize an APA paper? So there's what's referred to as IMRAD style, which is used by APA and by other similar formats. So IMRAD stands for Introduction, Method, Results, and Discussion. So you can kind of think of that as why, how, what, and who cares. Another way to look at an IMRAD paper is the hourglass metaphor. So you start off with the abstract, which is for the broadest audience overall. Then you have the introduction, which progressively gets more specific. The method, which is very specific to only the studies you conducted. The results, which once again are only specific to the studies you conducted. And then the discussion, which progressively gets more general as it goes on. So the abstract is the summary of an article. It's used for readers to determine if the article is relevant to their interests. So once you've conducted a search, such as in the previous video, you might look at the title, you might look at the abstract, and then move on to looking at the next article. So you can kind of think of it like the summary on the back of the book, except there's one major exception, right? If you're buying a book, the summary on the back might be a tease, right? It might leave off the end because they want you to buy it. You don't want to do that in the abstract. You really want to say, okay, this is what we found. It's a very short version of it, but it's accurate. It gives people enough information to know, okay, this person found that there is a relationship between whether a fan is blowing and whether, the speed of the air. So now I'm going to look at how they found it and, how strong that relationship is. You don't want to leave people guessing. Next is the introduction. So you start off by giving a broad overview for a non-specialist. So the old way that we used to say it is that your grandmother would understand. But one, not everybody has a grandmother, and two, your grandmother might be, might have a PhD in psychology for all I know. So a broad overview that a non-specialist would understand. Once you have that broad overview, it then focuses on the literature review, which is a description of past research that has been conducted. And then it ends with an overview of the current research and the hypothesis. So once again, you have really wide is the broad overview. The literature review is kind of more specific. You're getting more deeper into theory as it goes on. And then you get more specific as you start discussing your hypotheses. Then you have the method section. So this is a section specifically about the research that was conducted. And there are 3 or 4 main parts of a method section. So there's the research design, which some method sections include, some don't, depending on how obvious it is. Then you have the participants, so you kind of describe the sample, how many participants, what was the gender breakdown, what was the age breakdown, and so forth. Then you have the materials. One thing I've noticed a lot of people, myself included when I was a method student, get hung up on the word materials more than it's meant to be. It's not actually talking about things like your laptop, your table, and so forth. Materials is referring to your stimuli and your instruments. So the specific things that are needed to replicate the study. Finally, there's the procedure. So these are the steps taken in order that you use to collect data. In general, the methods section should give somebody enough information if they wanted to go out and replicate your study that they would be able to do so. Next is the results section. So the results section is what you found and how you analyzed it. So it should be a description of each statistical test that was performed and why it was performed. So for an example, we had hypothesis 1 where we focused, our hypothesis was that when a fan is blowing, air would move more quickly. Therefore, we conducted such and such statistical test, and we compared the velocity of air when the fan was not blowing to the velocity of air when the fan was blowing. You'd want to include the descriptive statistics, which is the actual results that were found. The velocity of the non-moving air was 0.2 kilometers per hour, and the velocity of the air when the fan was blowing was 0.9 kilometers per hour, and the standard deviations. If I was conducting a different statistical test, I would include different statistics. And then the actual results of the statistical tests themselves and whether or not they support the hypothesis. So in that case, I would say the air was moving more quickly when the fan was on. This provided support for my hypothesis. And finally, we have the discussion. So this is the final part of the paper relating your findings, once again, to a non-specialist. You start off relatively specific. You're restating your findings in plain language. You discuss the limitations of your study. You get broader as you discuss the implications for society, and then suggestions for future researchers. So once again, this is the bottom of the hourglass. You're getting more general over time. And that is the end of this part.